Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to the Valiant Dawn expansion full set review. Yes, I'm very happy with this. Now, we're starting with Dominion. Why? Because this is the aspect that I was given to spoil. So, the way they did final spoilers was that they gave the 6 aspects to 6 different people, which are known in the community. Now, the 6 people they ended up choosing was I got Dominion, Fuzz got Corruption, Bolter got Rage, Peacekeeper got Wisdom, Forest Bear Studios got Nature, and Ghetto got Order. So that's how they ended up doing that, and I'm going to be basically firing off set review videos once a day until like Tuesday or something. So expect a lot of videos out of me. These are also going to be very long. Not as long as my stream for it was, because that was just a lot of just random ranting about stuff, but it is probably going to be a long video. So I'm not going to delay this too much. Now, how am I going to do these? So I'm going to do Dominion first, then obviously. Then I'm doing Rage, Corruption, Order, Nature, Wisdom, so I'm kind of going around. The reason I'm doing it in that order is actually because Wisdom has a bunch of cards that I'm not really sure how they work, and I want to actually play with them. Which I'll be able to, since by the time I do that video, the set will be out. So yeah, I kind of want to play with those cards just to understand how they actually work. So that's basically why I want to do Wisdom last. And then I'll also do the multicolor cards in the Wisdom review. But anyway, let's get started with the skill shrine that Dominion have. Assassin's Guild. Assassin's Guild is a 1 Dominion, 1 generic skill shrine, and it has a 3 mana, 3 turn cooldown, same as Vampiric Touch. The next time you play a level 1 creature this turn, it deals damage equal to its attack to an enemy creature. It's interesting. It's like a Dominion Fireball, I guess. Like if you have Spoiled Aristocrat, it's just basically Fireball. There's 2 problems with it. One, the cooldown's quite extensive, so is the cost actually, so you do need to work quite hard for your Fireball. And you need a level 1 creature. That's an issue. You need to be actually able to play a level 1 creature, and it has to beat Vampiric Touch and Sell into Slavery. And Sell into Slavery is going to be a very, very good skill shrine after you see some of the rest of these cards. So I don't think Assassin's Guild will see play. It is a cycle, by the way. All the skill shrines relate to level 1 creatures because they're trying to encourage some level 1 creature play, since level 1 creatures are not very good in terms of 3 mana or 4 mana level 1 creatures are pretty much unplayable. So they're trying to promote them a bit, but I don't think this is the card that will do it. Baseborn Recruit. Now, I know that this was part of spoiler season, but because this is the full set review, I'm going to go over these cards again. So, Baseborn Recruit, 1 mana, 1 Dominion, 1/1 with 2 speed. This is a common. And when Baseborn Recruit deals combat damage to a creature, put a weakness emblem on that creature. Now, this is a decent 1-drop. It's not a very, very good one. Spoiled Aristocrat is far superior. However, it does add some extra consistency for the more aggro Dominion decks, which is appreciated. It's a bit low on the damage, but it's a decent combat type creature, and it does a decent job. It's not fantastic, though. It's the kind of 1-drop where if you only want 7 1-drops, you play 3 Baseborn and 4 Spoiled Aristocrat. Also forgot to mention that the skill shrine is a rare. Bloodwell Elite. Bloodwell Elite, 2 mana, 1 Dominion, 1 generic, 3/3 with 3 speed at uncommon. When Bloodwell Elite enters the field, choose 1, pay 1, sacrifice a creature, or sacrifice Bloodwell Elite. This is an interesting card. So basically, the drawback is that you have to pay for it in some way, since those are ridiculous stats, right? So at 3 mana, is it playable? Reasonably, 3/3 speed is quite dangerous, especially in trials. But in constructed, maybe not enough, but it's still quite dangerous. So what else can you do? You can sacrifice a creature. That probably won't come up, but you never know, it might. And you can sacrifice Bloodwell Elite. Okay, that's probably not going to be coming up, but if you need a death trigger for something like Flesh Sculptor, yeah, go for it, but I doubt that's going to be coming up. Now, the cost reduction does mean you can instill life it, so for 4 mana, you can play and still get the Bloodwell Elite in and then just pay the 1. since it is when it enters play. But I think this is a decent card. I don't think it's super strong, but I think it is a decent card that may show up in Constructed. Maybe not. It's difficult to gauge, but I think this is definitely a good Trials card. Champion of the Revolt. 3 mana, 1 Dominion, 2/1 with 2 speed at rare. Creatures you control are no longer slaves, and when Champion of the Revolt enters the field, search your deck for a slave card and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck. I really like this guy. Now, the first effect is actually less useful than the second one in my opinion, but it's still going to come up, because Dominion, if you remember, has that 0-cost slave, which means they're going to have a lot of slaves in play at once. So Champion of the Revolt allows you to just attack with all of them, and there's some other slaves in other factions now, so you can use Champion of the Revolt for that, and you can tutor for them. Now, there's a big slave that you want to be tutoring for later, but in general, it's less of a, like, tutoring for, like, a toolbox type of thing, and more just, it's straight card draw. It cycles. The body on it's pretty bad, but it does cycle, and you can probably make up for it in other ways. Say, if you don't have much of a board, and you just have Champion of the Revolt, then you can go Champion of the Revolt, and then get a Slave Gladiator and just play it. And then for your 3 mana 2 level turn, it's not fantastic, but you have, you know, your 4 attack, 3 HP at 2 speed. It's not awful. So, yeah, I think Champion will see a decent amount of play, and I think he fits into, or I guess she, fits into a deck that will probably be quite powerful, these Dominion beatdown decks, because they got some seriously good creatures overall in this expansion. But yeah, also an elf. Don't really think that's going to be coming up much, but also an elf. And in Trials, maybe. Depends on the rest of your deck. Cloning Vat. Cloning Vat is a 2 mana, 1 Dominion artifact at uncommon, and you can pay 2 mana and exhaust to summon a Fey-Saiyan mercenary or a level 1 slave of your choice to the field. Now, the Fey-Saiyan mercenary is just a golem, basically. It's a soldier, it's a 2/2 with 2 speed, 1 level. It's a very generic dude, but still very, very strong. Now, this is a card that looks quite powerful until you really think about it, and then it gets really disgusting. So the first thing is that it means Dominion no longer needs a second faction to use Sell into Slavery, because Cloning Vat for 2 mana at 1 turn cooldown with the hero power will draw you a card every turn. Every single turn. And there's some other really powerful interactions where you can use Cloning Vat, and you can use it immediately, but you can use Cloning Vat, and then end of turn of your opponent, make a token, and if you have Vampirism in play, you lose 1 life, then you get to attack for 3, you gain 2, and then you sacrifice it to draw, and repeat. So it's the ultimate destroy control decks type thing. Now, yes, you got Lamp if you're playing Wisdom Dominion Control, but if you're not playing Wisdom Dominion Control, if you're playing, say, Mono Dominion, then this is the perfect draw. If you're playing Corruption Dominion, that could be an interesting one. Or just any other faction, pretty much, outside of Wisdom. They now have inbuilt draw mechanics. Now, the secondary effect allows you to get a level 1 slave of your choice, which means you can just get one. Now, there is only 1 level 1 slave, I think. Unless... No, that's actually not true, because there's ones in other factions. But yeah, I think most of the time this will be making mercenaries, or maybe some of the other slaves, which we'll see a little bit later on in the set review. But the point is, you get your soldiers, you get to sacrifice them, it's super good. Now, the way this is worded is part of the new cards that allow you to just pick. Like an interface comes up and you get to just pick. So, very, very powerful card. We'll see extensive play. Also, it's not legendary, so you can have 3 in play at once, which is slightly disgusting against control decks. Enslave. 4 mana, 2 Dominion, so Helm cost, uncommon. Attach to an enemy creature with level 2 or less. You control this creature as a slave, so it is a Helm, basically. Now, it's more restrictive than Helm, but it doesn't kill the creature it's on. But then the creature becomes a slave. I think I just prefer Helm. Now, I will say it's uncommon, so that's going to be a sick Trials card there, but I think I prefer Helm, and the reason for it is stuff like Phoenix. Phoenix is really hard to deal with outside of Helm, and Enslave doesn't deal with it. and I think you can probably deal with the stuff Enslaved does through other means, and Helm still deals with the stuff Enslaved does. So I think you're probably going to be using Helm, with one exception. If you're not running artifacts, and artifact removal is common, Enslave is a spell and not an artifact. That's the only exception there. So, decent card, but probably will get beaten out by Helm. Face AM Mercenary, we already saw this with the Cloning Bat. As a card, it's a common, 2/2, 2 speed. That's not awful. In Trials, it will see a little bit of play, because it's not terrible stats at 2-drop. In Constructed, I doubt it. It is a soldier. That could be noteworthy. It is a soldier. There is an Order Dominion soldier deck, but I don't know if this makes the cut. But it is part of like a cycle of cards where now they're basically making every token that you can make is also a card. They did this from the start as well, where you had Golem from Founder Engineers and Militia, but Militia kind of just became a completely useless card, so they just removed it from the game, and it just became a token. Whereas in this case, and all the other cases, like with Silverfang, they're making them into actual cards again, which I think is fine, because it means we get a little bit of extra in the card pool, and it allows them to make the sets sort of artificially larger for stuff like Trials, which is always nice. Also, Silverfang just turned out to be good and constructed, so yeah. Mistress of the Shadows. 2 mana, 1 Dominion, 1 generic, rare, 3/3 with 2 speed, so Elite Vanguard stats there. When Mistress of the Shadow enters the field, the enemy hero takes control of it until the start of your next turn and you draw a card. This is very interesting. This is very interesting. So these are quite large stats for Dominion. And then they're a bit uncommon. They're not quick stats, they're just large. It's an elite Vanguard pretty much. So it draws a card, that's huge, that's a big deal. But then they get it for a turn. So they get to swing at you, and then you don't get to attack with it next turn because you get it back, but it doesn't unexhaust itself. It's still exhausted. You can't use it if they attack with it. So is that worth it? Maybe, honestly. I mean, it's still an elf. That could be critical. The stuff I do like this in is not necessarily implants type decks or beatdown decks. It's the sort of advanced Neva Dominion versions, which I think are missing 1 or 2 pieces. But this could definitely be it, because this is essentially their version of the old Brother-in-Arms in that deck, which was nerfed. But this is worse than that Brother-in-Arms, because they get it. So, will it be good? No idea. I mean, you get your 1 mana, you draw 2, and you've got the slaves as well, the 0 mana slaves. It could be fairly legit, that deck, to be honest. It definitely looks like it has a lot of punch to it. And I think if this sees play anywhere, it'll definitely be there. In Trials, I'm not sure about this. I think it's good, but I'm not really going to comment on it because that drawback is quite bad in Trials in certain situations. Because you basically can't use it as a blocker. Moonsteel Minor. Now, Moonsteel Minor is a 2 mana 1 Dominion. It is a common. 2/2 with 2 speed. It is a slave, and for 1 mana you can sacrifice the Minor to put a Might Emblem on another creature you control. Now, this is a slave you can get with the Cloning Vat, so I guess you can technically pay 3 mana to get a Might Emblem off it, which probably won't come up, but you never know. There are some situations. What do I think of this guy in general? I don't like him. Well, he's got the same sort of stats as Face A and Mercenary, but he's a slave, because Dominion doesn't really get the aggressive 2-drops. The ability is quite expensive. I mean, it's still decent, but you have to sacrifice it. It's like a Goblin Fireworker, but Fireworker's Artifact Destruction ability is really good, whereas this is not. Like, Artifact Destruction is worth the sacrifice. This is essentially a 3 mana Touch of Light that you have to have a creature in play to make instant. So yeah, that's a bit awkward, so I don't think this guy's very good, but it may come up off Cloning Vat, you never know. Murderous Chieftain, with a spelling mistake. There's a spelling mistake in Chieftain there. Love the artwork on this guy, by the way. But anyway, that spelling mistake is just funny. 2 mana, 2 Dominion, 1 generic, 5/5 with 2 speed, rare, unstoppable. When Murderous Chieftain enters the field, choose 1, pay 2 mana, sacrifice 2 creatures, or sacrifice Murderous Chieftain. So it's like what we saw in the Elite earlier. It's just twice as large and twice the effects, pretty much. So, base cost 4 mana. It's basically base cost Succubus cost for a 5/5 2 speed unstoppable, which is not bad, but I mean, for Trials, that's good on its own, just saying. Undead Hydra's feeling so bad about itself right now. But yeah, the rest of the effects. Sacrifice 2, that's probably too much. You could maybe have some tokens, I doubt it though. Maybe if you're playing Order Dominion, then you got some militia lying around. Or you sacrifice the Chieftain, which is, again, not something you really want to be doing unless you got stuff like Flesh Sculptors. So this guy's a bit of play to him with Instill Life, because for 5 mana Instill you can actually get a Murderous Chieftain out, so you can get your 5/5s, and for 7 mana Instill, which is a lot I might add, but for 7 mana Instill you can actually just resurrect 2 5/5s. That could be legit. That's a lot of punch. When you're both low on resources, that is a lot of punch. So I would not underestimate that interaction with Instill Life. That is a lot of power right there. And it means you don't have to be rerunning Valosworn Incarnate to get that kind of power. It also has Unstoppable, which is huge. So maybe this can cause a serious stirring in Instill Life. It also might just be worth running as a just beater in some sort of mid-rangey Dominion deck, because it does hurt. Does it do enough in just a mid-rangey Dominion deck? Probably not, but I don't think I'm ready to call this guy unplayable yet. I don't think he's super good, but I think he will see some play. Northern Wanderers, 3 mana, 1 Dominion, 2/3, 2 speed with uncommon, and it's an elf. Northern Wanderers gains +1/+1 as long as it's the only creature on your front line. So it becomes an insatiable ghoul if it's the only creature. This is bad. The reason for it is because insatiable ghoul is not hard to deal with if it's the only creature in play pretty much on one side of the board, and the early game matters a lot. So if you play your Northern Wanderers and you don't have any other early game, because otherwise it weakens it. If you play other early game, besides just Fireball and Assassinate, so you don't really want to do that. So you play your 3/4 beater and you're happy with it. But unlike with Ghoul, you can't have an Affected Survivor in play and a Vermin. So it makes it way less awkward to deal with and is way less powerful. So I don't think this guy's very good. And I don't think he's very good in Trials either. Could be wrong, but yeah. Austry Ska. Yes, the names. Austry Ska, Province Overseer. 4 mana, 1 Dominion, 1 generic, legendary, rare. 5/5 with 2 speed, not 0. That was actually a mistake that Ivco has now basically said that it's 2 speed. There were 3 cards that I think had a few mistakes on them for the spoilers, and this was one of them. So yes, this actually has 2 speed. Flying and deadly. As an additional cost to Austry Ska, sacrifice a creature, and if you have 4 levels, 2 of which are Dominion, you can pay 2 mana to get ranged into end of turn. This guy is a beating. You need a creature to sack. That is kind of huge. However, you do have the new slave, so you can do that. You can play that, play Austry Ska. Flying and deadly is very hard to handle. The getting 2 for 1 hurts, so yeah, that's a problem. However, you got Cloning Vat now. So you can use that instead. You got Cloning Vat, and this could maybe be the top of some sort of beatdown deck in Dominion. Flying Deadly is quite powerful, especially considering you can get ranged on it later. Is it good enough though? Maybe. It's powerful. It is definitely powerful. This is one hell of a Trials card, by the way. 5/5, Flying Deadly with range later. Okay, but it is competing with a card that we'll see a little later, and it's also competing with the Orc from earlier. So there are other Dominion creatures with these kinds of stats now, meaning that this is less of a sort of blowout, oh my god, play it. Like, think about it. You're paying basically for Deadly on 5/5, that's not that good unless it gets multi-blocked. Flying, that's good. Flying is good. You have to sacrifice though, that's bad, and this last ability will probably not come up that much. It will, but it's more like with Thionor, where it kinda comes up every so often, but not a constant thing. So, I'm not sure about Austry Ska. Austry Ska? Yeah. I think he'll see some play for a while, and then I think he might drop off. I think that's how I'm going to put that. It's difficult to gauge stuff with drawbacks a lot of the time, but generally the stuff with drawbacks isn't usually worth it most of the time. Prinha the Nightshade. Prinha the Nightshade is a 3 mana, 1 Dominion, a legendary epic, so we got our first epic. 2/3, 2 speed, it's an assassin and a vampire. Vampire, yeah, that actually comes up against mutant, which is kind of funny. You can play Prinha under an enemy creature with speed lower or equal to Prinha's speed, so 2. At the start of your turn, if Prinha is under that creature, destroy it and return Prinha onto the field, which is on your side. Now, I want to note that ability is only at the start of your turn. So if they destroy the creature Prinha's under, she just dies. She doesn't come back to the field. If you have 2 Dominion and 1 generic, she gets +1/+1 and 2 speed. Wow. That is insanely powerful. So, okay, let's look at the first abilities here. So the first ability is basically delayed removal, which is very powerful because you do get Prinha afterwards. So, is that good against the big creatures? Not massively in stuff like Antriel or Dragon, because you're probably dead anyway. But it's very good at killing stuff like Harpy. That's a big one. Or Library Guards. Or even just random stuff like Elf Warrior or things like that. Like if you kill Library Guards and then next turn you go 3 levels, you now have a 4-speed blocker, followed by a 4-speed attacker the turn after. What's crazy powerful about this is that later on you can actually get her on at 4 speed, so you can kill the 3-speed threats as well. And 3-4 with 4 speed is stats that really shouldn't exist at 4 speed. Sunchaser gets that once, and never again. This is a bit too pushed. I think this is too pushed. It's going to be very hard to handle, and it's basically unconditional removal. It's delayed removal, but it's still very powerful. You basically take 1 swing from whatever you put this under, and then you just tempo them out completely. Since you play a 3-drop, that will then get more powerful later, so the stat loss isn't that notable at all. So I think Prinha is very, very powerful. Like, I think she would actually see a small amount of play. Probably actually not a small amount. Probably a decent amount of play without the lost ability entirely. So I think she's incredibly strong, and get ready to see a lot of Prinha. Probably as a 3-of, since legendaries are a bit awkward to play with sometimes. Also, if you get that in Trials, yeah, it's just insane. Raging Minotaur. 3 mana, 1 Dominion, 1 generic, 5/5 with 1 speed at uncommon. Slave, Raging Minotaur gets 2 speed during your turn. At the start of your turn, Raging Minotaur deals 2 damage to you. This guy is completely insane. Completely insane. Also, random comment, if you change the Dominion symbol to a Rage one, no one would be the wiser. This is actually, it's a Rage card. It definitely is a Rage card. However, I don't think I'd want Rage with a 5/5 3-speed beater. This card is very strong. Very strong. The thing is, it doesn't just have 3 speed when attacking. It has 3 speed in general. Like, on your turn. Which means that you can actually attack into other stuff and use it as a removal spell. Now, you probably don't want to because you do take damage. But, you've got Vampirism. And if you use a Vampirism and you get a swing with Raging Minotaur, that's 6 damage! That's a lot. Now, I mentioned earlier with the slave tutor effect, there was a slave you want to tutor for. This is the one, because you get to curve out into it consistently. You get to play Raging Minotaur on turn 4 consistently, because your 3-drop tutors for it. That is incredibly strong. The slave is a bit awkward, but it's not too bad, because it means you can just play a creature afterwards and attack with it. And 5/5s are pretty much impossible to handle. They're pretty much impossible to handle. The drawback is not extensive. It basically has 2 drawbacks. It's bad at blocking and it deals damage to you, so it's bad on defense. But you're pretty much just going to be beating your opponent's face in. So, I mean, it may be bad on defense, but you've got Mutant, the king of defense. So, like, if you are playing this sort of Dominion beatdown deck, you can play 4 Mutant for your defense, and then play maybe 4 of the new 3-drop, and then 2 Raging Minotaur, and just tutor for them. Like, you don't need to play them on turn 4, just tutor for them if you need to go on the offense. Like, if you think you can go on the offense, just tutor for it. It is incredibly strong. Very, very strong. It's also uncommon, and is another 4-drop that you really don't want to see on your opponent's side if you're playing against Dominion in Trials. But yeah, this guy is super strong. Very, very powerful, and may just lead to mono Dominion beatdown being insane. Because they have a lot of card draw now, which means they can even run Cataclysm without actually being that scared of it. And they can do that on curve. So, very, very powerful card. And this is what I meant when I was looking at the Manticore. This is the kind of stuff it's competing with. Costs 1 less, has less drawbacks, very, very powerful. Scatador's Bidding. 3 mana, 2 Dominion, 2 generic, legendary epic spell. At the end of the enemy hero's turn, if that hero loses 1 life for each of his or her empty mana crystals above 3, and at the end of your turn, you gain 1 life for each of your empty mana crystals above 3. Now, this was originally a card in pre-beta, I think, which was in the trailer for Spellweaver, and I never saw it in the actual game. I don't know if it was in the game and removed, or, well, it must have been at some point, but I don't know if it was when the beta was running. It was before I started playing, but I think at that point it was just the same effect, but without the 3. So basically what it does is your opponent can only spend 3 mana, or they take damage, and if you spend more than 3 mana, you gain that much life. It does look like a do nothing to the board card, but there is a very, very potent combo with this, which we'll get to when I look at the removal spell later, but there's basically a 30 life gain combo with this for 14 mana with basic Despina, which sounds like a crazy insane amount of mana, but you can also just do a casual 20 for like 10 mana, which is very reachable, and Dominion, like all the combo pieces are in Dominion, and Dominion has Word of Power, which means they can do some serious ramping. So I actually think that this is very, very legit, and it may just be a decent 2-of in control decks, because if you play this against a control deck, you pretty much win. Like, if you play this in the mirror, I think the game's over, because you're going to be spending a lot of mana every turn on stuff like lamps, and your opponent, what's he going to do? Does not play anything? Like, he has to start playing stuff. Now, there's a workaround for this, which is with basic Despina, you can refresh your mana to take 0 damage. But still, it is a lot of damage. So I think that the life gain is the more important aspect of Scatador's bidding. But, well, it's more the combo potential, which I'll talk about when I get to the other card. But in general, I think it will see some play. I think it's quite strong, and is definitely a punish for the other control decks in the mirror. I think maybe Wisdom Dominion Control might just veer into like a mid-range deck, playing a combo finisher to deal with other slower decks, but we'll see. Slave Gladiator. Now, this guy we've had for a while, actually. He's been in the game and is legal currently. So, 0 mana, 1 Dominion, 1 generic, 2/2, 2 speed, Slave. Yes, she has flavor text now! Yes, he does not have an empty text box. He actually has flavor text now. Yeah, it was kind of funny where they didn't have the flavor text, because they just kind of released the card. It's like flavor text is an afterthought, but yeah, it's also common. So, Slave Gladiator has turned out to be quite good, as expected. He's a nice 2-drop in Dominion. He's an offensive 2-drop, which they didn't really have. And he helps a lot with stuff like Advanced Neva, which might become very, very strong based on the stuff that Dominion has. Not so much based on the stuff Nature has, because they actually have their stuff out now. But in terms of the Dominion stuff, that could definitely be quite powerful. But in general, he's been fitting into implants and any other beatdown type decks. He's just very, very good. And he's even better now that you've got the 3-drop that removes Slave that I can't remember the name of, and I really should go check. Champion of the Revolt. Yeah, removes Slave, which helps with multiple Slave Gladiator openings. So anyway, very, very good card. Soul Flames. 2 mana, 1 Dominion, common. Choose 1, destroy an enemy creature and lose life equal to its HP, or sacrifice a creature and gain life equal to its HP. It's not instant, but anyway. So the artwork, I think that's Antriel being killed, so Clone will be unhappy. But yeah, destroying an enemy creature, losing life, that is not as insane as it looks, because with Devious Plot cloning that, that's 3 mana. This is less setup, it's unconditional, so it deals with stuff like Runelet Incarnate that's got out of hand. It deals with, well, the Minotaur, but you don't really want to be taking 5. I mean, you kind of have to against big creatures. If the big creature will hit you anyway, Soul Flamesing it is correct. But later on in the game, you want to be using stuff like Helm and Cataclysm and Karthus as opposed to Soul Flames. So will it see play as a removal spell? Maybe. Maybe as a 2-of. Now, I think this card is very, very good. Why? Because of the second ability. That is part of a combo with Scatador's Bidding. Now, if you remember, Scatador's Bidding rewards you for basically spending mana above 3. So what you do is, if you have 10 mana, then you can play Scatador's Bidding, and then a Power Seeker, Yes, stay with me. You can play a Power Seeker, and then spend 3 mana, putting it up to 4 HP. Then you refresh with Basic Jaspina, spend another 8 mana, putting it up to 12 HP, and then Soul Flames it. You gain 12, and then Scatterdoor's Bidding gains you a further 7, which means you gain 19 life in 1 turn. And that's with 10 mana. 10 mana is very, very easy to get if you are playing either just a control deck and using that as your like end game win condition, or you're playing a combo deck and you're playing 4 Word of Power and 4 Power Surge. That's incredibly easy. In fact, the Dragon combo decks often get to 14 mana. And they have to play more pieces because they need New Horizons for Rage, they need Obelisk, they need Reanimate, things like that. This is a 3-card combo, which may be difficult to draw into, but it can be an afterthought. It doesn't need to be the only way you can win. It can be an afterthought win condition, and Soul Flames is also just a removal spell. So that could be very powerful, and there's other ways of gaining life. Whereas the Dragon combo decks didn't really have any way of dealing damage outside of Dragon. This sort of did, but not really. So when does it start getting ridiculous? Well, if you go up to 14 mana, which is just probably a turn later or 2 turns later than 10 mana when you're playing that many ramp spells, you can it just starts escalating from there. So you spend your 5 mana, you get your Power Seeker and your Scatterdoors, then you spend 7 mana into it, you put it up to 8 HP, refresh, spend another 12, put it up to 20, Soul Flames it, and then gain 32 life. So yeah, the numbers start getting a little insane. They do start getting a little mad. So this will probably be part of some very obnoxious 1-turn heal deck. And remember, Word of Grace, does it beat it? I don't know actually, because Word of Grace combo decks require Reflector, they require Obelisk, they require 5 order or 4 order levels. Like, these are Old Dominion cards. You can fit them into just a control deck, and you can run 2 Scatterdoors Bidding, and then maybe 3 Soul Flames and 2 Power Seeker, and the rest of the deck. Vamp Lamp takes up between 6 and 7 slots in most decks. So if you just cut the lamps, if you cut the lamps and you cut, say, one other removal spell because you're playing 3 Soul Flames now, and say went down to 2 Vampirisms because they might still be useful, maybe not, you've just fit the combo into a Wisdom Dominion deck, and you can go a bit more beatdown as well to like put the pressure on and just use this for later. So it could be potentially very, very strong. We'll have to see, but it is a very, very powerful life gain combo. And the last Dominion card, this is the last in this set of cards, is Vampiric Ashes. 2 mana, 1 Dominion, 0/5 with 2 speed at rare, can't attack, and for 2 mana you can give it +2 attack and -2 HP, and it can attack this turn. Now you can activate this multiple times. So this is a very strong card because it is a 0/5 blocker, which is very hard to get past for stuff like Rage, and keeping in mind that you got Vampiric Ashes now and Mutant, so it's going to be very hard to get past these kinds of cards with Rage. 0/5 is also a large amount of HP. And then late game, you're playing your dorky blocker and you draw it late game. Oh, that sucks. Well, actually not really, because you're going to have a lot of mana. So you can just pump 4 mana into it, and if you have a Vampirism in play, well, then you just attack for 6 and gain 6. That seems pretty legit for a defensive blocker. I think this guy's quite good. I do think this guy is quite good. How good? Good question. But I do think he will see a decent amount of play, and he's also less vulnerable to stuff like weakness counters. He's vulnerable to Assassinate, but a lot of stuff at lower mana cost is, so that's expected. But yeah, he's less vulnerable to weakness counters, and he doesn't die to stuff like Fireball. They need like a Fireball and a 1-drop to attack it, so it's absorbed 5 damage, and also they have to spend 3 mana on it. So yeah, you can play Vampiric Ashes turn 1 if you're going... if you're going second, you play Vampiric Ashes turn 1 into a 1-drop. Not a lot they can do about that. And if your turn 2 involves an Assassinate, well, on turn 3, are they going to have, what, a 1-drop in play, and they've used a Fireball, they have a 1-drop in play, and that's it. And then your next turn, I don't know, your next turn from there can actually just be anything, because you probably got Mutant the turn after, and you probably just won the game. So, Vampiric Ashes is a very, very good anti-aggro type of play. It's very, very bad against stuff like Elves at higher speeds, but then they've got Assassin for that. So, depending on the metagame, you'll either play it, or you'll be playing the Assassin instead. Although, even against Elves, it's not awful. It does block Sharpshooter, blocks Grove Guardian. There are some 2-speed Elves. So anyway, I do think he's pretty decent, and we'll have to see how good. It depends a lot on the deck around him. I think the deck around him is quite powerful. Like, you can use Vampiric Ashes to pay for the slave requirement for Raging Minotaur, for instance. So that's a thing. that's quite powerful. If you have Vampiric Ashes in play, you play your Raging Minotaur. They both have 5 HP. And if they both survive, and your next turn is Vampirism, yeah, you attack for 6 and gain 6. So, yeah, it's quite powerful. It is definitely quite a powerful deck that's been set out. So what do I think of the Dominion set of cards? Well, I do think that they may have overtuned them a bit. So, quick sort of go over. Assassin's Guild I don't think is very good. Baseborn is a playable 1-drop, which is nice. Bloodwell Elite we'll have to see, but I think might be playable. I think it's on the lower end of that. Champion of the Revolt I think is quite good, because it allows you to just have straight draw. Cloning Vat is amazing, because it allows you to get any slave if you like, or just a Faesaean Mercenary, and use it for infinite draw, or end of turn. Like, it's a controllable Restless Tombs, or Tombs of the Damned, which is just incredibly good. A controllable Tombs of the Damned is very, very good. It requires mana, but Cloning Vat may actually be the reason why Dominion aggro decks play basic Despina instead of Coronis now. I mean, it may sound a bit silly, but you've got an extra 3-drop now, and you might not need the Ravens anymore when you've got Cloning Vat, and you are going to be very mana hungry, so you might want to be running basic Despina. Enslave, I don't think we'll see play because of Helm. Faesaean Mercenary probably won't see play on its own, but you never know. The soldier decks tend to make dorky soldiers look a lot better. Mistress of Shadows, I think we might see some play in the advanced Neva Dominion type of Hate Bears deck. Moonsteel Minor, I don't think is very playable at all, but it is noteworthy that you can get this off Cloning Vat and turn it into a Might Emblem. Murderous Chieftain might see some play in some Instill Life deck. Probably won't, though, outside of that, but we'll have to see. Is competing with Raging Minotaur for the beatdown slot. Very, very powerful with Instill, though. 7 mana Instill sounds like a lot, but when you're resurrecting 10/10 Unstoppable with 2 speed, yeah, that's powerful. Northern Wanderers is not a good card. Austry Ska I don't think we'll see play in the end, because there's just other better beatdown options, but it might be worth it. It might be easy. It might be easy enough to sacrifice something. So we'll have to see if he does in the end see play. Printha is very, very strong removal and also a powerful beater. So I think that Printha will see a ton of play and probably will get nerfed in the future. Raging Minotaur, very, very strong. Again, a beater. Yeah, Dominion had some serious power creatures in this set. And this allows you to go on the offense. I mean, try beating this as a control deck. It's just insane. So the mono Dominion decks now have basically a control killer. And they have life gain built into them. It also encourages you to play Vampirism now, which is better because you can go higher levels, because you've got Cloning Vat for the draw with Stronghold Metropolis. Scatador's Bidding, I think, is a decent card on its own, quite powerful as a mirror breaker for control decks, but it also just results in a 30 life gain combo with Soul Flames, but Soul Flames will probably see you play as a removal spell as well. Sleep Gladiator is a very, very nice aggro card. It's already seeing extensive play and will continue to do so. Well, I say extensive. Extensive in the Dominion aggro decks, which are less common. But I mean, it was in the Masters winning deck that Laurentiel played, so I won't play it down too much. And then Vampiric Ashes, solid defensive creature, will probably be very, very good and might make it a bit too hard to get past the early defense in Dominion at the moment. So anyway, that is all for my Dominion set review. Now, I will have an image compilation for this in the description, so go have a look at that and share it around, because this is, well, very, very interesting stuff. Now, the next one I'll be doing is Rage, which will be tomorrow. Now, Rage, as of recording this, Rage actually hasn't been spoiled yet. I have seen it because I actually know Bolter, but yeah, Rage hasn't been spoiled yet, although by the time this is uploaded it probably will have been. So I'll do that tomorrow, and then I'll do Corruption the day after, then Order, then Nature, then Wisdom. Now, on Friday, I'm actually going to be doing a release podcast with Fuzz and Bolter and possibly some other people. Don't know, yeah, I have no idea who we're going to end up with that. It depends on who's free, pretty much. But we're going to try and get as many content producers on it as possible, since the way they did spoilers was really, really cool. I really liked getting spoilers to do myself. I've never had that before. I've never had a spoiler for a card game before, and it's like, here's 20, since we all got given the multicolor cards as well. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. For my feedback, want to ask me any questions about the cards, put it in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel directly, there is a link to my Patreon in the description, along with a referral code for new players that gives you 75,000 gold and the Disquisitive Spirit Card Back to start out. But as for now, it's been Jotto, signing off.